There's a strange kind of silence that comes with certain traditions, the kind that walks into the room before the person who carries them. That's what it felt like when my mother-in-law, Marlene, walked into our living room one rainy Sunday afternoon, took a seat like she owned the house, and announced, with the weight of history in her voice, the baby should be named Richard. It's only right. Now, to anyone else, that might sound harmless. Even sweet. A way to honor her late husband. A man who, to hear her tell it, built his family with his bare hands, served his country, paid his taxes early, and kept his shoes lined up like soldiers under the bed. And sure, to her, Richard was a legacy. A name steeped in duty, strength, and pride. But to me, Richard was the man who once tried to have my father deported. I wish I could tell you that was an exaggeration. That I'm stretching the truth for dramatic effect. But no, it's as real as the scar my father still carries in his voice from the day he was handcuffed outside the bakery he'd been working at for 7 years. My father, Emiliano, came here with nothing but 2 hands and a hunger I'll never fully understand. Built a life from scratch. Never asked for more than a fair shot. And one day, after a neighbor's noise complaint turned into a visit from immigration, he found himself in a holding cell, facing the end of everything he'd worked for. The report? The tip that triggered it? It came from Richard. My wife's father. He didn't know my dad personally. Never met him. But to Richard, Emiliano was part of the problem. An invisible statistic. A name with an accent. A man who didn't belong. It took months, lawyers, and the kindness of strangers to undo the damage. My father never talked much about that time, just said the worst part wasn't the fear, or the cold floors of detention, or the legal fees that nearly bankrupted us. It was the look on my face when I realized what was happening. I was 9 years old. Fast forward 20 years, and now here I am, married to Claire, Richard's daughter. We've built something beautiful, despite the past. Despite Marlene's cold eyes and the way she still corrects my pronunciation when I say certain English words. Claire and I had talked about it, the name thing. She said her mother might suggest it, but we'd make our own choice. She said she understood the pain, that she didn't want to glorify a man whose legacy was tied to harm. I believed her. But that day, when Marlene brought it up, something shifted. She wasn't asking. She was expecting. It's tradition, she said, with that clipped tone that always made me feel like I was standing in front of a judge instead of a relative. Every firstborn son is named after his grandfather. It's how we carry the family forward. Claire said nothing. She sat frozen beside me, fingers tightening around her mug. She didn't look at me, and she didn't look at her mother. Just stared at the steam rising from her tea like it might carry her out of the room. I cleared my throat. I don't think that's the right name for our son, I said, keeping my voice steady. Marlene blinked once, then twice, like I'd just spoken in code. And why wouldn't it be? She asked. You married into this family. You honor our traditions. I should have walked away. Should have waited, taken time, pulled Claire aside and talked through it calmly. But something in me, something that had stayed quiet for too long, finally stood up. Because your husband once tried to destroy mine. That's why. The room went still. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. Claire finally looked at me then, her face pale, her eyes wide. Marlene's expression didn't change much. Just a slow, disbelieving shake of her head. That was a long time ago, she said. Yes, I replied. But our son will live in the future. And I won't build it on a name soaked in that kind of history. She stood up slowly, smoothed the front of her blouse, and left without another word. Claire didn't speak for a while after that. Just sat there. Quiet. Somewhere between the daughter she'd always been and the mother she was about to become. That night, I lay awake wondering if I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. Not between Marlene and me, that was never whole to begin with. But between Claire and her past, and Claire and me. Because a name might be letters and syllables, but sometimes it's also a scar. And this one wasn't healed yet. The house was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that hums, low and electric. Claire and I didn't talk after Marlene left. Not really. Just drifted through the evening like strangers stuck in the same storm. She cleaned the kitchen with the intensity of someone trying not to feel anything. I pretended to read on the couch, flipping pages I didn't see. But the silence couldn't hold forever. She finally spoke while she was drying a plate, a little too forcefully, like it had insulted her. "You blindsided her," she said. Not angry. Not cold. Just tired. I looked up. She blindsided us. She didn't mean it that way. No. Then what way did she mean it when she marched in here and told us what our son's name was gonna be like it was already stitched on a monogrammed blanket? Claire set the plate down. Hard. But not enough to break it. She turned to face me, arms crossed, her eyes the same mix of fire and fragility I'd seen on the day I first told her about what happened to my dad. "She's trying to keep a tradition alive," she said. "That's all. She doesn't know the full story." "She knows enough," I said, standing now. "She knew her husband was the one who made that phone call. She just chose to forget." Claire's voice dropped low. "You never told me for sure it was him." I stared at her, stunned. "Claire. He gave his name to the officer. We saw it on the report. The bakery owner told us he was the one who complained. He even bragged about reporting illegals at dinner parties. Your father didn't just make a mistake, he believed in what he did." She looked down then. Jaw tight. Hands clenched. "He was different back then." "So was my dad," I said. "Before he got arrested in front of his son. Before he had to prove, for the second time, that he was worthy of being here. And now you want me to name our child after the man who did that to him?" Silence. Then, softer, I didn't know how deep it went. "And that?" That was the part that stung. Because she did know. I'd told her. Maybe not in detail. Maybe not in headlines and affidavits. But I'd sat on that same couch 2 years ago, held her hand, and told her the story, the cold linoleum floor of the detention center, my mom's shaking voice on the phone, my father's silent tears when he came home. I'd told her what it meant to live with that kind of fear etched into your memory. She had listened. She had cried with me. And somehow, it still hadn't taken root. Claire sank into a kitchen chair, her shoulders folding in. "It's my dad's name too," she said. "Not just Richard the man. Richard the father. Richard the provider. The guy who coached my soccer games. Who made pancakes on Sundays. It's complicated." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because she was right. It was complicated. And it always is, isn't it? One man's villain is another man's father. One name, two legacies. "I'm not trying to erase your memories," I said. "I'm asking that we don't build our son's future on mine." She looked up at me then, tears in her eyes, but something steadier beneath them. "What if we found another name? Something that honors both sides without reopening wounds?" I paused. Thought about it. About how naming a child isn't just about syllables or lineage, it's about intention. About what you want them to carry, and what you refuse to pass down. "I'd like that," I said. But the conversation wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because the next morning, I got a call. It was my father. He'd gotten wind of the naming debate. Marlene, it seemed, had paid him a visit. And she hadn't come to apologize. My father doesn't get rattled easily. He's the kind of man who built himself out of necessity, steady hands, even voice, eyes that have seen both mercy and cruelty and still choose patience. So when he called me that morning and said, "She came here," I knew he didn't mean a neighbor dropping by with muffins. She, of course, was Marlene. I sat on the edge of the bed, still half-dressed, Claire brushing her hair in the bathroom. I asked him what happened. "She just showed up," he said. "Didn't ask to come in. Just stood on the porch. Said she thought we should talk," woman to father-in-law. I asked if you could hear the quotes around the word talk. He exhaled. Not a sigh, more like a slow release of heat he didn't want to carry into the rest of his day. "She said naming the baby after Richard was important. Said it was about legacy. About respect. Then she asked if I could find it in my heart to let the past go. Said she hoped I could be the bigger man." I closed my eyes. "What did you say?" He was quiet for a moment. Then. "I told her I forgave her husband years ago. But that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it sure doesn't mean turning his name into a banner my grandson should carry." That hit me like a hammer wrapped in cloth. Because my father, the same man who never raised his voice, who prayed more than he preached, had drawn a line. And he wasn't moving it for anyone. "She didn't like that," he added. "Left with her jaw tight. Didn't say goodbye. Just walked back to her car like she still expected the world to make room for her truth." I thanked him. Told him I'd handle it. He said, "You already are. Just don't let guilt dress itself up as tradition." Claire overheard part of the call. When I hung up, she came and sat beside me. Said nothing for a while. Just leaned her head on my shoulder. I could feel the weight in her. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, but there was a tremble under it. I didn't know she'd go to him. I didn't think she'd cross that line. "She's protecting what she thinks is hers," I said. "And we're protecting what's next." That afternoon, we drove to see my father. Just to sit with him. Just to let him know that porch hadn't become a battleground. Claire brought empanadas from his favorite place and an old photo album we'd been meaning to show him. She didn't say much, but she looked him in the eye. And he looked back, soft, but firm, and nodded like something silent had passed between them. That was the day I realized something. This wasn't just about one name. This was about what we inherit. Not just genes or recipes or Sunday rituals. But stories. Silence. Scars. The stuff we don't name, but pass down anyway. And that's what I told Claire on the drive home. "We get to decide," I said. "What this kid carries. What they never have to carry. We don't owe anyone the weight they refuse to bear." She reached over and took my hand. "I want a name that comes with light," she said. "Not shadows." And for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt something loosen in my chest. Like we were finally writing our own chapter, not just redacting someone else's. But, of course, peace never comes without one last strike. That night, Marlene sent an email. Subject line, "You've embarrassed this family." I saw the subject line and knew before I clicked. You've embarrassed this family. Marlene never wasted time with pleasantries when she was mad, she let the sharp edge show first. Her anger didn't boil. It iced over. Claire was in the next room folding baby clothes when I opened it. I didn't want her to see my face. Didn't want her to mistake my silence for surrender. The message started off civil, the kind of civility that's more weapon than warmth. I didn't think I would have to explain this to my own daughter and her husband, but apparently some people still let resentment outweigh respect. She went on about tradition, about family unity, about how hard it was for her to carry Richard's legacy alone after his passing. She wrote that, this baby was his blood too, and that, refusing to honor him dishonors the very line that made Claire who she is. But then she crossed the line. Again. Your father may have had a difficult experience, one I'm sure he's dramatized over the years, but Richard was a good man. A patriot. A man who believed in the law. And if that's a problem for you, maybe you weren't the right fit for this family to begin with. I stared at that line so long the words started to shimmer. Not because I didn't understand them, but because I understood exactly what she meant. And exactly how long she'd been holding it back. Claire noticed me sitting there, jaw tight, screen glowing, and came over slowly. She didn't ask to read it. She didn't have to. She just said, "What are you going to say?" And for the first time in weeks, the answer was easy. Not what she wants to hear. I opened a reply. Took my time. Wrote with the same steadiness my father always carried, quiet, precise, and unflinching. Marlene. Thank you for your email. It helped me see things more clearly. You're right, Richard was a man of conviction. He believed in the law. But belief doesn't make a man righteous, and conviction doesn't make him kind. He made a decision once that nearly cost my father everything. A decision rooted in fear and in judgment. That's not drama. That's history. And pretending otherwise is exactly why people like him got away with it. You may see his name as a legacy. But for us, it's a lesson. A reminder that names carry weight. And we won't give our child something that was once used to crush someone else. Claire and I are building a life that honors both sides of our story, not just the ones that fit neatly on a family tree. That means choosing names with purpose. With healing. With truth. If that's embarrassing to you, so be it. We're not here to reenact the past. We're here to raise someone who's free from it. I wish you peace. Luis. I showed it to Claire before I hit send. She read it twice. Then she kissed my forehead and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't mean just for the words. She meant for the line we drew together. We never got a reply. But a few days later, Claire got a call from her brother. Apparently Marlene had been venting to the family group chat, claiming I was disrespecting her grief and alienating her grandchild from his rightful roots. Funny, isn't it? How people use grief as a shield when they don't want to look at their own guilt. Claire didn't argue with her brother. Just said we were moving forward. Said the decision was made. He didn't push. He knew better. That weekend, we sat down with a list of names. And for the first time, we started from zero. No legacies. No ghosts. Just names that sounded like light. One caught both our eyes. It was simple. Strong. Carried no echoes of anyone we knew. Just a name that felt new, like a doorway opening, not a door creaking behind us. And that was when we knew. This baby wouldn't carry the weight of Marlene's version of family. He'd carry the future. We kept the baby's name to ourselves. Not out of spite. Not to be dramatic. Just, out of peace. We weren't trying to make a statement. We were trying to build a life that wasn't shaped by someone else's expectations. The shower was Claire's idea. A backyard thing. Low-key. No themes or fancy banners, just folding chairs, finger food, and a big pitcher of lemonade. Her friends came, arms full of gifts wrapped in soft blues and neutral greens. My cousins came with loud voices and plastic containers full of tamales and arroz con leche. It wasn't polished, but it was full of heart, the kind of joy you don't schedule, the kind that just shows up and stays late. There was one chair left empty. Not by accident. Marlene had been invited, out of respect, not reconciliation. Claire wrote her a short message. No apologies, no olive branches. Just, "You're welcome to come." No expectations. Just family. She never replied. And in truth, we didn't expect her to. Claire didn't say anything about it the whole day. But I saw her glance at that chair more than once, in between opening onesies and smiling through people's advice like it was her first baby and her 50th at the same time. There was a sadness in her smile when no one was watching. A quiet morning, not for her mother's presence, but for what that presence could have been. But if Marlene left a space behind, someone else filled it. My dad. He stood near the grill most of the afternoon, chatting with my TO about who makes the best carne asada in the city. But just before the cake came out, he walked over to Claire and tapped her gently on the shoulder. "I have something for the baby," he said. She blinked, surprised. "You do?" He nodded. Reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn box. Inside was a silver coin, dull at the edges, smooth from years of handling. "My father gave me this when I left home," he said. Said it wasn't worth much money, but that it had crossed borders. Hidden in boots. In rice bags. In coat linings. It was a reminder, he said, that we don't always pass down wealth, but we pass down will. Claire held it carefully, like it might crack in her hands. And for a second, I saw her eyes glisten. "I want him to have it," my dad said. "So when he grows up and people ask where he comes from, he'll know, it started with strength. Not just the kind in blood, but the kind you choose to carry." Claire nodded slowly. "Thank you." She stopped, voice trembling. Then she did something that surprised even me. She reached out and hugged him. Not a polite hug. A full one. The kind that says, "I see what you've been holding, and I'm ready to help carry it now." That moment meant more than any apology from Marlene ever could. Later that night, after everyone left and the backyard was quiet again, we sat on the porch, the coin resting on the table between us. Claire was the first to speak. "You know," she said, "for a long time, I thought tradition was something you followed to stay connected. But now I think, maybe it's something you reshaped to stay honest." I didn't say anything. Just reached for her hand. The baby kicked for the first time that night. Not a flutter, a real one. Like he was saying, "I'm here. I'm listening. Keep going." And we would. Because we'd chosen a name. One that came not from obligation, but from possibility. A name that honored no one in particular, and in doing so, honored everyone who'd fought to bring us to this moment. And we hadn't told anyone yet. Not even my dad. But we would. It was just after 3 a.m. when the world shifted. Claire had been in labor for hours, but something about those early morning contractions hit different. Time started moving like water, fast and slow all at once, and the hospital room became its own little universe. Just her, me, the steady beeping of machines, and the promise of someone about to arrive. I remember her hand in mine, sweaty, shaking, but strong. Stronger than I'd ever seen her. And I'd seen her stand up to her mother. I'd seen her walk away from a name she thought she had to carry. But this? This was something ancient. Something sacred. She was becoming. When the baby finally came, the room got real quiet. Just for a second. Just long enough for the sound of his first breath to land. And then he cried. Loud. Clear. Like he was announcing himself to the world. They handed him to Claire first. She looked down at him, tears on her cheeks, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she looked at me. "It's time," she said. And I knew what she meant. We told the nurse his name together. Isaac. Not Richard. Not anyone from either side. Just Isaac, a name that means laughter in Hebrew. Because that's what we wanted for him. Not to carry our pain, but to rise above it. To live lightly. Freely. With joy. We sent out the text announcements later that morning, photo attached, tiny fist raised, dark hair, sleepy eyes. Just a perfect little human who had no idea how much work it took to clear the space he now occupied. Marlene didn't respond. No call. No congratulations. No passive-aggressive comment about the name. Just silence. But Claire's brother did. He texted, "He's beautiful." And the name, it suits him. Proud of you both. My father came to meet Isaac that afternoon. He held him close, arms steady, eyes soft. Then he took the coin from his jacket and slipped it into the baby blanket. "Welcome," he whispered. "You're exactly where you belong." I watched them, the oldest and the newest generation, and felt something settle in my chest. Not closure, not pride. Something quieter. Like calm. Like roots. That night, in the quiet of the recovery room, Claire and I sat in the glow of dim lights and the hum of machines. Isaac slept between us, a tiny bundle breathing the same air we'd fought so hard to make safe. Claire looked over at me and said, "Do you think we'll ever tell him about Richard?" She nodded. "Someday," I said. "When he's old enough to understand that some names come with weight, and that it's okay to choose your own." She smiled. "And when he asks why we picked Isaac?" I leaned back and looked at him. "Because laughter is what you hear after the storm clears." The storm had cleared. It hadn't been easy. We lost things along the way, approval, convenience, maybe even some relationships that wouldn't come back. But what we gained was cleaner. Truer. A family that wasn't built on guilt or tradition, but choice. On saying no to the old weight so we could say yes to something better. And Isaac would grow up knowing that. Not because we'd tell him every detail. But because he'd feel it. In our home. In his name. In the way we showed up for him, not with legacy, but with love.